Fala galera do canal, me chamo Julien e eu acho que todo mundo já sabe, o Trump venceu a eleição americana e uma de suas promessas de campanha foi taxar em mais de 100% os países que busquem o caminho da desdolarização. Uma fala direta para os países BRICS, entre eles o Brasil. Cara, o vídeo é bem interessante e polêmico ao mesmo tempo, mas já deixe seu like, inscreva-se no nosso canal para ajudar na divulgação e valeu!
When Donald Trump was talking about tariffs the first time round and people thought, oh, well, he's probably kidding or he's probably bluffing, and he went and implemented them, right? He went and put in a bunch of tariffs. And this is a sort of thing that when you're looking at Donald Trump and you sit there saying, oh, well, you know, Democrats in Congress may thwart. You didn't need Democrats in Congress or anybody in Congress because tariffs is one of those things that a president can just go and do. Right? So when Donald Trump is talking about tariffs, you do have to take it seriously because he does have a record as a former president of having used tariffs among the U.S. economic arsenal quite prolifically, right? I do think that this idea of de-dollarization more broadly is something that the United States is paying attention to. It is something that is resonant. The idea of whether or not the U.S. dollar is strong is a resonant idea. Although, interestingly enough, Donald Trump has talked about wanting to eventually lower rates during his presidency, upcoming in his mind, and sort of make the dollar maybe not quite as strong as it is right now. But the idea of the dollar as a global backbone of the financial system, I think it's resonant on both sides of the political spectrum, as well as the electorate, both the sort of prestige there, but also the kind of structural advantages you get when you have that reserve currency status. And all of the time that there's noise about maybe that is under threat is something that the U.S. government will take seriously, no matter who is in the White House. But you certainly, as I say, you certainly hear Donald Trump talking about the possibility of penalizing there. I wouldn't rule that out.
His advisors are already planning ahead. They're formulating policies for when Trump returns to the White House. That is their hope. And a new report tells us what they're working on. Trump's advisors want to punish some countries that want to de-dollarize. We've spoken to you about this before, about de-dollarization, but here's a brief overview. Today, the US dollar is the most important currency in the world. It's the world's reserve currency, the currency all countries hoard to protect national wealth. About 60% of the world has savings tied to the US dollar. These are called dollar-dominated assets. And what does this mean in practical terms? It means that the US has unreasonable control over the world's economy. We trade with the US dollar, we save using the US dollar, and we're all forced to track the US dollar to make sure we don't suffer because of American policies. It's a system where we depend on the US for our own financial stability. So what's the solution? De-dollarization, moving away from this excessive dependence on the US dollar. Some countries have been trying to do this or thinking about it, making small but defiant moves. Like India using the rupee to buy oil from the UAE, or Argentina using the Chinese yuan to pay off a loan. These were moves to reduce dependency on the US dollar and help currencies from the global south rise in value. This is de-dollarization in a nutshell. But obviously, the US does not like that. If de-dollarization begins in earnest, the US will start losing its clout, and Donald Trump is not a fan of that idea. He gave an interview recently. I'll quote from what he said. I hate when countries go off the dollar. I would not allow countries to go off the dollar because when we lose that standard, that will be like losing a revolutionary war. That will be a hit to our country. It doesn't get clearer than that. Trump wants everyone to stay hooked to the US dollar, and now his advisors are working to make this possible. They're planning punishments and sanctions for anyone who does not toe this line. And India is in their crosshairs. Along with Brazil, Russia, China, and South Africa, the BRICS countries basically, they have caught Trump's eye. His advisors are planning to target BRICS for what was discussed last year during the last summit in South Africa. That was last August. The BRICS countries spoke about creating a new common currency, a currency to be used among BRICS member nations for trade and investments. This new BRICS currency was supposed to be a hedge, a protection against the US dollar. It sounds like a smart, pragmatic move, a way to defend national interest. It's an interesting idea. But it's nowhere near becoming a reality. There are some very obvious security issues like sharing a currency with China, so the BRICS currency is still a pipe dream. Despite this, it seems Trump and his team feel threatened, as though this BRICS currency is an attack on the supremacy of the US dollar. So it seems they're planning a counterstrike. And what would that look like? The options include export controls, currency manipulation charges, and tariffs. Let me explain. Export controls restrict free trade. They prevent a country from accessing some goods or technologies, like what the US does with China. It prevents Beijing from accessing advanced computer chips. That's an export control. Trump may expand export controls to countries that want de-dollarization. Then we have currency manipulation charges. They're a more subtle attack. A country can be branded a currency manipulator. It will affect your reputation, your currency may be shunned, and it could lose value. Then we come to tariffs, the simplest form of punishment. Trump may put tariffs on goods from a country, like an additional import tax. It makes an imported product more expensive for American customers if there's more tariff, meaning the demand will go down because the product has become more expensive and the country's trade suffers. Trump and his advisors want to impose these punishments on BRICS countries for daring to try and replace the dollar.
Former President Donald Trump has pledged to impose a 100% tariff on countries that move away from using the US dollar in international trade. Speaking at a rally in Wisconsin, Trump said any nation abandoning the dollar would face severe trade penalties with the United States. His remarks come as the dominance of the US dollar, which still accounts for 59% of global foreign exchange reserves, according to the IMF, is being challenged by growing discussions of de-dollarization. Countries like China, India and Brazil have explored alternatives to the dollar but face hurdles in creating a common currency policy. De-dollarization, the global trend to reduce reliance on the US dollar in trade, has gained momentum in recent years. India in particular, it's been actively pushing for trade settlements in its own currency, the rupee. The RBI approved 34 Russian banks to open rupee accounts with the Indian banks, facilitating trade in national currencies amid Western sanctions.
Então, o assunto da desdolarização é um tema bastante debatido aqui no canal. Eu já trouxe vários vídeos mostrando que os países BRICS estão buscando esse caminho da desdolarização e fazendo suas transações em moeda local. Eu vi muitos especialistas falando que, independente do presidente que assumisse, se fosse Kamala ou Trump, esse assunto seria bastante debatido e os Estados Unidos dariam uma resposta a isso. Até porque a desdolarização é uma coisa assim que fere diretamente aos Estados Unidos. Ou seja, cara, é um tema assim bastante complexo. Eu só sei que o dólar hoje passou da casa dos R$6. Não que essas ações já tenham sido colocadas em prática, muito pelo contrário, tá tudo muito assim no início, porém são fatos que impactam diretamente o nosso dia a dia. Cara, é um assunto assim bastante polêmico. Por favor, deixe seu comentário aqui embaixo, deixe seu like, inscreva-se no nosso canal para ajudar com tudo isso e valeu!